Welcome to the HR Community Podcast. My name is Shane O'Neill, founder of Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Each episode we will host HR leaders and discuss their journey and discover best practice HR solutions across the HR industry. Whether you're a CEO, HR executive, or operating across the wider HR space, this podcast is for you. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment and share your reviews. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Community Podcast. Today, I'm joined with Alison Scott. Alison is the People and Culture Director with Systra. Welcome, Alison.
Thanks, Shane. Great to be here today.
Great to have you. Tell us a little bit about Systra, if you can, Alison, and a little more about your opportunity for, I guess, those who are listening who don't know who Systra are or what they do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Systra is a French-based company, and its major shareholders are actually railway operators, SNCF and RATP. So for those who have travelled the railways over in France, you've likely travelled on one of their trains.
Awesome.
Locally within the ANZ arena, so Australia and New Zealand, we provide transport consultancy, and we also do consultancy within the defence sector, and as recently as this month, have a segment of our business that will focus on tunnels and civil infrastructure. So really a consultancy, probably more space, and working on some of the big projects at the moment, including Cross River Rail up in Queensland, Sydney Metro West in New South Wales, and also again on the metro with the domestic airport that will be out at Badgerys Creek. So some real showcase type stuff as well.
Fantastic. Some pretty heavy hitting projects there as well. Tell us a little about your role then, Alison.
Yeah, sure. So it's been an interesting role. I've been with the organisation for just under 6 years, so quite a period of time. I'm currently in charge of, I guess, the ANZ remit, which includes Australia, New Zealand. There's a team of engineers that I support of about 25, 30 people in the UK, which is a little bit strange for a global organisation. Yeah. And I did used to support Singapore as well, so within this role. So,
wow.
I guess, as you said, People and Culture Director, broad remit, part of the executive leadership team too. So definitely sitting at the table with the CEO and other leaders of the business when we're setting the strategy and directions. Really interesting role.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And one thing I like to do with a lot of guests that come on the show is sort of track back a little bit. So I did do some digging and noticed that you sort of stepped into HR in particular, if I'm right, in the healthcare sector, and then you sort of moved into where you are today, lots of engineering and sort of more consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. My entry role into HR was healthcare, not for profit as well. Yeah. I think it's probably important to put a spin on it.
Yeah.
And aged care as well. So really complex industry and environment. I think it was a really good landing for me as my first HR job. Lots of awards, unions. Our healthcare workers have been in the spotlight over recent years, but there really is demand for them. There is always those pay grade issues to attract staff as well. So it was a significantly large region. There was 2,500 staff within that region that I worked within. So, it was a great entry point for me. But as you know, it wasn't long-lived, and I've been in the engineering and science sector for over 16 years now. So
fantastic. Amazing. And then after health, where did you go and sort of tell us a little about the journey from there?
Yeah, so moving out of health, I joined, I guess, that healthcare organisation when they were merging two regions. So once the merger had been completed, I moved on and I moved to an organisation that built power plants. They were cogeneration power plants. I'll just put that out there. They weren't. And they were mainly being built on mine sites or in regional areas. So it was throughout the Asia Pacific region as well. So it was really interesting and a really good role where I think it was probably the first role where I started to target working for international organisations as well. I did study a bit of international business, and in the remit under the power plant company that I worked for, they were a European head office. We looked after projects throughout Thailand, Singapore, New Caledonia. So basically the whole of the Asia Pac type of region, as well as projects in regional Queensland and Western Australia. So really good role.
Yeah, sounds like it. And tell us a little bit more about that experience, particularly on the international side. So, I mean, apart from it being supporting different countries and time zones, like what would you say would be the main differentiator versus, a more sort of locally based HR director role?
Probably difficult for me because I've targeted those roles, and I'd say the majority of my career has been within that international remit.
Yep.
So I think there's always challenges when you're working as beyond the time zone, like you mentioned. There's the culture is one part. Particularly when you've got a remit, you're trying to build and work across an organisation with leaders in multiple different countries with different cultures, trying to find a midpoint. But it's just the variety. I think there's so much more variety when you're working within an international remit for me. I did do a contract locally for a government organisation in New South Wales.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the component it didn't have. It didn't have that same variety. And I missed that. And that was, I guess, a reason why I've continued to stay in international organisations.
Fantastic. Within that international remit as well, given all the experience you have, Alison, how have you seen the different demands, I guess, particularly from an engineering industry perspective with talent and development and pathways and, even on the graduate side? Because I know it's competitive here in Australia and a lot of listeners would be well across what's happening here locally or maybe they are, maybe they're not. But internationally, I wouldn't really have too much information on that myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest challenges as an international organisation is, particularly when you're in a skill shortage country like Australia, when we're going out to market, we may be fishing in the same pond as our colleagues are for their own talent.
Yeah.
So the competition internally could become something of concern if you don't have the right mechanisms in place. I know that's been a widely discussed topic where we are now, and we've got a lot of things in place so that we don't overstep on each other's toes. And it goes beyond poaching of your own staff. Like I said, it's about candidature as well and what your EVP is and what your offering is. And so Australia is always an attractive country in terms of weather, but I'd like to say within our broader group right now, we've got a really strong EVP offering, which separates us probably out there. So
fantastic.
But internationally, I think you brought up a few points, and graduates is a hot topic. Very hot topic of everybody talking about growing their own talent and having those maturity of retirement age, particularly amongst big projects globally, particularly in infrastructure. You've always seen project directors and really senior engineers travel the world for projects. And so it's regardless of borders. I'd say that's borderless, and that talent's going to retire anyway. So we have a global shortage of extensive skills, particularly within engineering anyway.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And then in terms of, I guess when you look at the wider talent space, particularly in engineering again, what other sort of demands are you sort of seeing or even what sort of major challenges are you sort of dealing with we could start locally and then sort of on a more international space?
Yeah, I think COVID changed the world. Rightly or wrongly, it changed the way we work, and we've digitalized and things like that, and I think that became part of the norm. For us, we very early on committed to 100% flexibility within our organisation.
Wow.
Which was a big thing to do. It was before everything reopened, and we said, that's it, we're 100%, flexible even when we return. And that was a game changer for us, I think, in the market. I think flexibility is a given now of an expectation amongst candidates, but be a workplace that's committed to it and not trying to pare back. I know I've talked to some colleagues in other industries, and there is a bit of a paring back of minimum days in offices and things like that. But we're not doing that. The other areas is just that knowledge sharing has increased. I think it's just ramped up a whole nother notch. We really linked in with each other whilst we were working remote. People weren't able to just jump on a flight and travel. So throughout that 2.5 years, we really made ways of working where we did do that international knowledge sharing. We set up committees of expertise and things like that. So that's probably significantly changed for us. Some other flexibilities for our staff have also been enabling them to work from anywhere in the world for a month each year.
That's
to
cool.
spend time with families. That connection and realising that people are people is really important. And, you know, when engineers are so highly sought after, they've got way more bargaining chips on the table for things like this to be expectations. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. And on the flip side, does that sort of type of approach, particularly with international engineers, having that flexibility to work where they want, do you see that as a pretty key attraction tool then within that industry?
It's certainly one of our UVP items, I would say, 100%. It does, on the flip side, though, create a lot more work for us in terms of capturing our culture and maintaining our culture of connectivity. And that's been a lot more work, I think, from a people and culture point of view than what we would have had to work on maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. And you must have seen it as well over the last couple of years, Alison, particularly in the industries that you've worked in from a HR leadership perspective, is the whole, not so much shift, but the improvement with gender balance and diversity and that particularly in engineering. Have you seen much transformation in that? And, do you feel like there's quite a bit to go? Or?
Yeah, 100%. I think, I've seen a significant change. I think there's some really great programs out there in industry. I know that we're, significant supporters of a number of those, but there's lots of different ones to support the different parts of diversity. I think engineering has generally always acknowledged that there's a low representation amongst gender, in that it tends to be heavily swayed to more male representation, and that is the case globally. I think it's not just within Australia. But there has been a lot of work also within other areas of diversity as well. And there's significant papers being written and a lot of discussion about our answer to a skills shortage is to use DEI to make jobs that are skills short acceptable and interesting to people who would have not necessarily been interested before. Definitely have the capability and the skills, but it just was never maybe talked about or discussed with them, so they never took an interest. And it's definitely an option for us to address the skills gap going forward. Yeah,
it would be for sure. That's really interesting. And is there any particular countries, whether it's in your remit or any of your sort of global regional leaders' remits, is there any sort of countries that seem to be leading the charge with that? Or, would you say are Australia sort of fairly high in that ranking?
Amongst my peers, I would say in terms of that DEI aspect, Canada's very good and the UK seem to have a lot of practices in place, but Australia definitely within our global group seems to be quite leaders within that sphere. I think it's good because we've got the statutory element, we've got the willingness of employers. I think, my leadership team is extremely supportive of these initiatives. And then we've also got the requirement by our workforce. We have people coming to work with an expectation that these are the practices that are in place. So it really is encompassing. And then we've got really great companies that we can partner with, like Tech Girls, for instance, which is to entice more girls to study STEM subjects from primary school upwards. So those bodies really help us in our work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see, given your experience in the space, Alison, do you see many other challenges ahead in this space? The world of work is evolving, and I think expectations, salary, demands in the economy, all these things factor in and create, I guess, different challenges for these kind of strategies. So we're constantly trying to move and and be agile to sort of align them to the right moment. But do you see many more challenges in this overall, I guess, diversity, inclusion and equity space?
Yeah, massively. And I think particularly, it was International Women's Day recently, and I think that gender pay gap gets a lot of discussion, but there will be a lot more equity of pay discussions amongst broader diversity and inclusion initiatives. I think I can foresee that coming specifically. I think there's been a focus and there's some really good mechanisms in place to measure through WGA and things for gender equity. But I do foresee remuneration and equity amongst other groups also becoming a focus area in the future. But it's certainly difficult. I'm probably the first to admit that I'm a generalist from a HR practitioner background. I'm not a specialist. There's lots and lots of diversity and equity specialists out there. But it does pinch people, I think, within roles like mine about where to focus. Quite reactive in terms of the demands of the roles and where our focuses lie. And there is a lot more stretch about our bandwidth. It's great and it's really exciting, but it's definitely one of the challenges to make sure that the focus is broad enough to be encompassing enough for what you need to do for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on the demands there, which I've got a couple of questions on as well, because obviously being a business that are offering so much remote flexibility, do you feel like there's still a lot of demand there from maybe a HR technology perspective versus, when it was, a bit more traditional, sort of pre-COVID, people worked in the office most days? Or
yeah, I think it's driven home the requirement for strong relationships. So I was fortunate, like I said, I'm like longevity roles that I hold, so I had really established relationships leading into that flexibility. It probably would be a little bit tougher to form those relationships if you're coming into an organisation like ours straight off the bat. Internal communications become a huge item for us. And, where does internal comms fit within a business? I've seen it fit in multiple different areas of a business previously. For us, internal comms, we work with our Marcoms team, but a lot of the internal stuff is done within the people and culture remit. So there's that cultural element within communication that's quite focused.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And I've seen it myself even over the last sort of recent years, particularly in HR leadership roles where it's not just people and culture now, it's people, culture, communications, risk, sustainability. There's a whole range of facets that seem to be slotting under HR, which is really, really exciting, actually. Do you see that something that's going to potentially continue, particularly in some of the more engineering industries, that sort of demand on HR to continue the charge with different facets across the business operations?
Yeah, I think so, particularly for leaders that value and can see the value from those offerings as well. I think, communications, and there's always that branding piece and external focus, but retention's such a critical item. When you have a skill short market, you need to retain your people. Lots and lots of engagement surveys that have been done over the recent years critically focus back on communication and availability and access and ability not to be a number and to have a voice and all of those things, which makes that comms piece just so critical to success.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Couple of quick questions for you, Alison, before we wrap up. Most influential person?
Yeah, really difficult.
Or persons.
Yeah, there's so many people doing great stuff out there, and I think, you could choose loads and loads of different people. For me, I think within the HR world, Simon Sinek has some really good work out there that's really relevant for all of us. And I think also then going back to some recent statutory changes and things, I think Elizabeth Broderick locally has been really good. Obviously, her previous commissioner role, and now she's got a role with the UN. I think she's pretty influential in our time. Yeah.
Fantastic. What's your best lesson learned?
My best lesson. I think to recruit to areas that aren't necessarily your strengths. So to build a team around you that's complementary has probably been my best lesson learned early on, and definitely helps me to achieve a lot more these days.
Absolutely. No, I hear you there. Who do you inspire, Alison?
Hopefully my children when they get older. We'll see. I don't know if they feel that inspired. I've always tried to have a team that has some more early career people within it to learn and grow, and I think I learn off them as well. So hopefully some of the people who've worked in my teams over time have been influenced as well.
Fantastic. What frustrates you? Assuming there's something there that does.
I think everyone has a frustration. I think people that assume probably, and I think HR people would largely have had people assume who we are and what we do without any knowledge or of working with a good HR team in practice. It's probably a key frustration. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. Top 3 bits of advice or pieces of advice you would give an aspiring HR leader who's listening?
Yeah, definitely take opportunities as they present themselves to you, particularly with roles. I think the unknown is sometimes a good thing.
Yeah.
The more, information that you can get early on is really great. There's loads and loads of like half an hour lunch and learns and things about stat changes and things like that. And I think it's good to keep up to date and current. And I think the third one is to build a really strong network. HR can be quite isolating. There's loads of roles where you take and there's only 1 or 2 of you within a business, as opposed to being in a big corporate where you're in massive HR teams. And I think if you take a role, it's great. Regardless, you get lots of opportunity. But if you build a really strong network, you always feel part of a team and well supported.
Yeah, no, I really agree with you there. And even on the network side, I think even the fact that a lot of us can work quite remotely now, which is great, is just, being always knowing that it's still important to stay in touch and, be part of a community, and whether it's an industry body or whether it's more of a informal group that you set up with other HR leaders to catch up. I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely helped me along my time and still does to this day.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alison, for jumping on today. Hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you in a few weeks.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you for tuning in to the HR Community Podcast. Remember to like and subscribe and share your views and comments below. This podcast was brought to you by Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Whether you're a candidate looking for a new role or organization looking to secure brand new talent for your team, please get in touch with us today. Thank you.